Demanded Earth kneel, we burn their thrones instead. The crimson star Vexathari cast its dying light across the bridge of the Sovereign's Pride, humanity's last capital ship. Admiral Marcus Chen stood motionless before the viewports, watching the alien fleet that stretched beyond the horizon. Thousands of ships bearing the golden crescents of the hegemony, waiting like vultures over humanity's corpse. 6 months. 6 months since the hegemony had delivered their ultimatum to Earth. Submit to imperial rule or face extinction. The message had been broadcast across every human colony, every space station, every ship in the void. Their envoy, a towering crystalline being called High Arbiter Zexmoth, had made the terms brutally clear. Your species has expanded beyond its ordained boundaries, the creature had intoned, its voice like grinding glass. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. You will kneel or you will burn. Earth's United Colonial Council had debated for weeks. Politicians spoke of compromise, of finding middle ground. But those who had witnessed the hegemony's mercy on other worlds knew better. The Veltari had tried to negotiate. Their homeworld was now a field of glass. The Zephyrians had offered tribute. Their children now served in hegemony slave pits. Marcus's sister Elena had been among the first to die when the hegemony made their point. Her research station on Kepler 442b had been vaporized as a demonstration of resolve. 20,000 civilians, gone in an instant. Her last transmission still echoed in his mind. Tell them we never bowed, Marcus. Tell them we died standing. The bridge door hissed open. Commander Sarah Reeves entered, her face grim, uniform bearing fresh scorch marks from their last engagement. They hit the Manila station, she reported flatly. Civilian targets only. No survivors. Marcus didn't flinch. His voice was ice. And the council? Still debating terms of surrender. Her tone was bitter acid. Marcus had abandoned hope in politicians long ago. He turned from the viewport, jaw set. Signal the fleet. All ships, full burn. We're taking the fight to them. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean? Yes, he said quietly. We're going to burn their thrones. An hour later, the fleet moved. 47 ships, all that remained of humanity's naval strength. Carriers, destroyers, assault cruisers, every hull scarred by months of desperate fighting. No reinforcements were coming. No miracle weapons waited in reserve. This was it. The target, Vexathari Prime, seat of the hegemony's power. It wasn't just revenge, it was necessity. If they didn't shatter the hegemony's will now, humanity would face extinction within the year. Earth's children would grow up in chains, if they grew up at all. The crew of the Sovereign's Pride moved with grim determination. No one questioned the orders. Everyone aboard had lost someone, a parent, a spouse, a child. They were beyond hope now. What remained was fury, cold and focused. As the fleet entered hyperspace, the stars became streaks of light, then vanished entirely. Silence fell on the bridge. Marcus stood alone at the command station, a single line from the hegemony's ultimatum, replaying in his mind. Inferior species exist to serve their betters. You will kneel or you will die. The irony would be written in fire. They emerged at the edge of the Vexathari system 14 days later. The hegemony fleet was waiting. 300 ships of gleaming crystalline hulls, arranged in perfect formations like a forest of deadly spears. Any sane commander would have turned and run. But Marcus felt only cold certainty. Transmit fleet-wide, he ordered. Sarah opened the channel. Marcus's voice rang clear across all frequencies. All ships, all crews. There will be no surrender today. We fight not for victory, but for memory, so our children will know we chose to burn rather than kneel. A chorus of acknowledgments followed, voices steady despite the odds. The first salvo came from the hegemony. Plasma lances and graviton torpedoes tore through the void, consuming 3 human ships in brilliant explosions. The Dauntless, New Horizon, and Terra's Wrath, their names echoed across fleet communications as each loss carved deeper into the survivors' resolve. Then humanity struck back. Nuclear-tipped missiles and kinetic penetrators slammed into the alien formation. Human ships weren't pretty. They were built for war, bristling with railguns and missile pods. Where hegemony vessels relied on shields and maneuverability, human ships were armored fortresses, designed to take punishment and keep fighting. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the command rail. The battle was chaos incarnate, fire and fury, life extinguished by the thousands each second. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. "Helm," Marcus barked. "Punch through their center line. Get us to the planet." Sarah turned sharply. "You mean to bombard the surface?" He met her gaze unflinchingly. "They taught us this kind of warfare. Now they'll see how quick humans learn." The Sovereign's Pride and her escorts drove through the thinning alien line, ships wreathed in fire, hulls cracked in bleeding atmosphere. Still they pressed forward, and then it was there. Vexathari Prime. A world of impossible beauty, crystalline spires reaching toward the heavens, cities that sang with harmonic resonance, floating gardens that defied gravity, home to 50 billion beings who had called humanity inferior insects and demanded they grovel. "All batteries," Marcus said, his voice flat as space itself. "Fire!" The order had barely left his lips when the gunnery crews responded. The Sovereign's Pride's main batteries charged with a deep thrum that shook the entire ship. Across the fleet, surviving cruisers and destroyers locked their targeting systems onto the planet below. Vexathari Prime, the jewel of the hegemony, a world that had stood unconquered for millennia. Here the High Arbiters had laughed as human colonies burned. Here they had celebrated the genocide of the Veltari. Here they had raised toast to humanity's coming enslavement. Now it would burn. "First volley away," the weapons officer reported, voice tight with controlled emotion. On the tactical display, streaks of brilliant white light plunged through the planet's upper atmosphere. Thermonuclear warheads, antimatter charges, kinetic penetrators traveling at near light speed. Humanity had prepared for this day, had built weapons specifically for breaking worlds. Marcus felt no triumph watching the strikes fall, only hollow necessity. The first impacts lit the planet's surface like a newborn star. From orbit, the devastation was surreal. Shockwaves rippling across continents, whole cities vanishing in expanding spheres of superheated plasma. The targeting systems fed back thermal readings, seismic data, casualty estimates that climbed into the hundreds of millions. Marcus forced himself to watch every number. He had sworn never to forget Elena's face, never to let her sacrifice be meaningless. Her last words burned in his memory. "Tell them we died standing." "We're all dying standing now, sister." Incoming transmissions flooded the communications board, desperate pleas from the planet's surface. "Human fleet, cease fire! Civilians are dying! There are children in the cities!" Another burst. "Admiral Chen, we seek negotiation. Your point has been made." Marcus's voice cut across the bridge like a blade. "Silence those transmissions." The communications officer hesitated, looking to Sarah. "Do it," she said grimly. "We came here to end this." The battle still raged around them. Human ships died one by one as the hegemony fleet rallied, but they fought with diminishing fury. The sight of their homeworld burning beneath them had shattered something fundamental in the alien psyche. "Multiple hegemony ships breaking formation," Sarah reported. "They're pulling back to outer system perimeter." Marcus's eyes narrowed. Cowards ran when it was their turn to burn. Another volley of planet killers fell. Each impact carved new scars into Vexathari Prime's surface. The planet's communication grid was collapsing under electromagnetic interference. But fragments of transmissions still leaked through. Screams, prayers, curses in a dozen alien languages. Under the weight of necessity, Marcus felt something stir in his chest. A question he'd been avoiding. How far is too far? But it was too late to stop now. "Sir," a sensor officer called out, voice strained. "We have multiple evacuation ships attempting to break atmosphere. Civilian transports packed beyond capacity." Marcus crossed to the tactical display. Hundreds of ships were clawing for orbit through the smoke and fire. Crystalline arc ships, their hulls glowing with desperate speed as they tried to escape the inferno below. Sarah watched him carefully. Orders? The bridge fell silent. Marcus gripped the command rail, his throat suddenly dry. Another memory surfaced. The evacuation ships fleeing Elena Station, shot down by hegemony interceptors without hesitation. No mercy, no survivors. Now humanity stood at the same crossroads. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was granite. Target military craft only. Civilian vessels, disable their drives. Don't let them reach hegemony space with intelligence, but no direct kills on refugee ships. It was a compromise born of the last threads of his humanity. Not clean, not merciful, but not outright slaughter of the innocent. Sarah nodded slowly and relayed the orders. Human fighter wings screamed down through the burning atmosphere, hunting military gunships while carefully disabling civilian transports. Escape pods drifted helplessly as their parent ships spiraled back toward the surface, drives gutted but life support intact. By hour 3, Vexathari Prime was barely visible through the storm of ash and fire. Continental shelves had begun to crack. Oceans boiled, sending columns of steam into space. The planet's day-night cycle had become meaningless beneath the perpetual twilight of destruction. Casualty estimates? Marcus asked quietly. The sensor officer's voice was hollow. 12 billion and climbing, sir. Marcus said nothing. It should have felt like victory. Instead, standing on the command deck, watching the death of a world, he felt only the crushing weight of necessity and the knowledge that they'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Sarah approached, her expression troubled. We're making history here, Marcus, she said quietly for his ears alone. History will judge us, he replied, but our children will be alive to read it. Hours passed. By the time the human fleet regrouped in high orbit, Vexathari Prime was a broken shell. Atmosphere poisoned, cities gone, surface temperatures rising beyond the tolerance of any known life. No aid would come fast enough. No recovery was possible on a human timescale. Silence hung heavy on the bridge. Finally, Sarah broke it. We've done it. The hegemony's throne world is burning. Marcus nodded, though his throat felt tight. Signal the fleet. Prepare for withdrawal. Our work here is finished. As the battered ships turned away from the ruin below, fleet communications carried no cheers, no victory songs, only weary voices reporting damage, casualties, and the names of ships lost. Victory, but at a cost that would haunt them all. Later, alone in his quarters, Marcus sat in the dim emergency lighting, a single data crystal in his hand. Elena's final message. He hadn't dared play it during the battle. Now, with the ghosts of 12 billion dead pressing against his thoughts, he activated the recording. Elena's familiar voice filled the small space. You know me, brother, stubborn to the end. We won't make it out of this one. But listen to me, don't you kneel. Don't you ever let them make slaves of our children. If they come for Earth, you burn their thrones, Marcus. You burn them all. Marcus stared at the deck plating. I did, he whispered to her memory. God help me, I did. But there was no absolution in the silence. Words spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The hegemony's capital destroyed. Vexathari Prime uninhabitable. 12 billion dead in a single day. Across the alien empire, governors panicked. Some fled their posts, others sued for separate peace. Still others called for total war against the human plague. But their fleets were scattered, their confidence shattered, their throne world nothing but radioactive ash. On Earth, the Colonial Council met in emergency session. Politicians shouted over each other about war crimes, about Pyrrhic victories, about humanity's place in a galaxy that would never trust them again. But for the crews of the fleet drifting in cold space, there was no celebration. Aboard the Sovereign's Pride, Marcus stood again at the viewport, watching distant stars. Sarah approached, her voice subdued. We did what we had to. Did we? He asked softly. She looked at him for a long moment. If we hadn't, it would have been earth burning. Our cities, our children. Marcus nodded slowly, but the weight remained. No regrets about the necessity, but no peace either. A new transmission arrived from deep in hegemony space, a surviving High Arbiter faction. You have shown your barbarity, humans. The galaxy will never accept you now. This war is far from over. Marcus's jaw tightened. His eyes burned with exhaustion and iron resolve. Then we keep burning thrones, he said coldly, until there are no more left to burn. The fleet drifted in the void for 5 days, running silent while repairs were made. Of 47 ships that had jumped to Vexathari, only 19 remained combat capable. More than half bore crippling damage that would take months to properly repair. Months they didn't have. Aboard the Sovereign's Pride, the mood was grim. No victory celebrations, no declarations of triumph. Just the cold, empty weight of what they'd accomplished, and the knowledge that it was only the beginning. Admiral Marcus Chen barely slept. When he did, the dreams were worse than waking. Cities of crystal and song crumbling into ash, children's voices crying out in languages he didn't understand, the weight of 12 billion souls pressing down like a physical force. And still the war wasn't over. Intelligence reports flooded in from human deep space reconnaissance. The hegemony was rallying what remained of their core fleets, pulling back from frontier sectors to protect their remaining throne worlds. Worse, they were calling on their client species. Races that had served the hegemony for millennia were now being pressed into total war against humanity. In the Sovereign's Pride's war room, Marcus leaned over a holographic star map with Sarah and the surviving fleet commanders. Red icons blinked ominously throughout hegemony space. Enemy forces consolidating, new alliances forming, entire species choosing sides in what was becoming a galactic war. "We've kicked the hornet's nest," Sarah said flatly. "Now every species in 3 sectors knows what humans do to throne worlds." Marcus rubbed his eyes, exhaustion weighing on every word. They knew what the hegemony did to species that refused to kneel. Let them know what happens to species that demand kneeling. Commander Harrison, captain of the wounded destroyer Retribution, spoke up. "We bought ourselves breathing room, but it won't last. The client species will mobilize faster than we can rebuild, which means we can't stop now." "No," Marcus agreed quietly. "We finish this, or Earth becomes the next example." But even among the human commanders, cracks were showing. After the War Council dissolved, Sarah cornered Marcus in the observation lounge. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport. Cold, distant, indifferent to the carnage humans had unleashed. "You can't burn every throne world in the galaxy, Marcus," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "Can't I? We killed 12 billion people. That wasn't justice. That was terror as a weapon of war." He finally turned, eyes burning with fatigue and something darker beneath. "Justice?" he said softly. "There is no justice anymore. Not after what they did to Elena, to the Veltari, to every species that dared stand upright. All that remains is survival, and the will to make our enemies pay the price of threatening it." Long silence stretched between them. Finally, Sarah said, "You're burning out the fleet's soul, Marcus. If we chase vengeance into every corner of the galaxy, we might not remain human enough to deserve survival." Marcus stared at the stars. "I'm not sure we deserve it anyway, but our children will have the chance to be better than us." The hegemony's response came 2 weeks after Vexathari. Not negotiation, retaliation. A human listening post at Proxima Centauri vanished in nuclear fire. Then a colony transport bound for New Geneva. Ambushed, no survivors. Only wreckage scattered across space. But it was the third strike that changed everything. The data came in through quantum burst transmission. Kepler station destroyed. New weapon signatures detected. Bioweapons deployed. On the bridge of the Sovereign's Pride, the full horror became clear. Sarah handed Marcus a datapad, her face pale as death. "Intercepted logs from the attack. The hegemony is using plague spores now." Marcus frowned. "Plague spores?" Sarah's voice was grim. "Biological weapon. turns a planet's ecosystem against its inhabitants. We thought it was theoretical. The holographic display showed grainy footage from Kepler station's final moments. A peaceful agricultural colony of 40,000 suddenly writhing in agony as their own crops turned toxic. Their livestock became carriers of engineered viruses, their very air becoming poison. Marcus's jaw clenched. How many colonies do we have that are vulnerable to biological attack? Too many, Sarah said. We never built defenses against weaponized evolution. We're completely exposed. The choice was clear now. No room for half measures. Marcus turned to his fleet commanders. We accelerate the timeline, hit their biological research worlds, their client species capitals. Everywhere they're building these abominations, we turn to glass. Even Harrison hesitated. Sir, we're talking about dozens of worlds. We'd have to commit genocide on a galactic scale. Marcus's gaze was steel. They chose this war. They chose to weaponize extinction. If they want to play with species killers, then they'll learn why humans survived long enough to reach the stars. Not everyone followed. That night, 6 ships broke formation, captains who couldn't stomach the path Marcus was carving through the galaxy. They transmitted final messages, apologies, explanations, pleas for understanding, before jumping back toward human space. Marcus didn't try to stop them. If they can't do what's necessary, he told Sarah, better they leave before necessity destroys them too. But every loss bit deep. Every ship mattered now, every crew member. The mathematics of survival were unforgiving. The next target was chosen, Zefkari, homeworld of the Zephyrians. Once an independent species, they'd been vassals of the hegemony for 3,000 years. Now their biological research stations were producing new weapons to use against human worlds. Engineered plagues, atmospheric toxins, genetic bombs designed to target human DNA. Zefkari wasn't just a military target. It was where the hegemony's client species learned that serving oppression would bring the same fate as practicing it. As the fleet plotted course, Sarah made one final attempt to reach Marcus. You realize what we're becoming, she said. This isn't defense anymore. It's extermination as policy. Marcus looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. They made it that way the moment they deployed bioweapons against our colonies. We're crossing lines that can never be uncrossed. His voice was steady, implacable. There are no lines left, Sarah. The only choice now is who dies, them or us. And so the battered fleet, running on emergency supplies and patched hull plating, set course for Zefkari. Every crew member knew the stakes. They might not survive the next battle, but they also knew that failure meant Earth's children would inherit a galaxy where humanity existed only as slaves or corpses. As the Sovereign's Pride entered hyperspace, Marcus stood once more at the viewport, watching reality stretch and distort around them. He thought of Elena's last words, thought of the billions already dead on both sides, thought of the men and women now following him deeper into darkness. And for the first time since the war began, a single question haunted his mind. At what point does necessary survival become the very evil we swore to fight? But space offered no answers. Only the cold mathematics of war and the path ahead that led to either victory or extinction. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zefkari system to find it heavily fortified. The Zephyrians had learned from Vexathari's fate. Orbital defense platforms ringed their homeworld like metal moons. Minefields filled the space between, and 3 full battle fleets, Hegemony, Zephyrian, and their Thekmari allies, waited in defensive formation. Marcus stood at the Sovereign's Pride's command station, studying the tactical display. Every instinct screamed that this was suicide. His fleet was outnumbered 4-1, ships still bearing damage from previous battles, crews exhausted beyond human limits. But Zefkari's bioweapons labs were producing enough engineered plague to sterilize every human world within 6 months. There was no choice but to break through. They're hailing us, Sarah reported. On screen, the holodisplay shimmered, revealing a Zephyrian commander, tall, ethereal, with skin like polished silver and eyes that held ancient sadness. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made human ears ache. Admiral Chen of the human fleet, I am High Commander Velthara. We know why you have come, and we know what you have done to Vexathari. We do not wish this fate for our world." Marcus stepped forward. "Then surrender your biological weapons research. Destroy the plague laboratories. Stand down your fleets. We cannot. The hegemony holds our offspring as surety for our cooperation. If we fail them, our children die." Marcus felt something twist in his chest, a recognition of the impossible position they faced. But Elena's voice echoed in his memory. The hegemony's victims didn't have the luxury of impossible positions. "Then you'll die with your children in your arms rather than living to see them enslaved," Marcus said coldly. "Because if those weapons launch against human worlds, I'll turn every Zephyrian planet to ash." The alien commander's silver features crumpled with what might have been tears. "Then we are all damned." The transmission ended. The battle began immediately. Unlike Vexathari, this wasn't a demonstration of power. It was total war between species fighting for survival. The Zephyrian ships moved like living things, flowing through space in patterns that defied tactical prediction. Their weapons were works of art, energy lances that cut through armor like silk, gravitic mines that crushed ships into singularities. But humans had learned to fight like cornered animals. The Sovereign's Pride led the assault, her forward batteries hammering the orbital defenses, while her escort destroyers laid down covering fire. The Retribution, Harrison's ship, dove straight into the minefield, using her point defense systems to detonate a corridor through the deadly field. The price was immediate and brutal. The destroyer New Melbourne was caught by a gravitic mine, her hull compressing to a point of light in milliseconds. The cruiser Thermopylae lost her engines to Zephyrian energy lances and began tumbling toward the planet's gravity well. Marcus watched each loss register on the tactical display. 13 ships, 12, 11. Each number representing hundreds of lives, thousands of years of human experience, irreplaceable knowledge and skill falling into the void. "We're not going to make it through," Sarah said quietly. "Yes, we are," Marcus replied. "Because failure wasn't an option. Because somewhere on Zefkari, laboratories were preparing to murder every human child who would ever be born." The fleet pushed deeper, trading ship for ship with the defenders. Human vessels weren't elegant like their alien counterparts. They were brutal, functional, designed to absorb punishment and keep fighting long past the point where graceful ships would surrender. The Defiant lost her bow section to enemy fire, but kept her weapons online, using manual targeting to blast holes in the Zephyrian formation. The Terra's Revenge vented atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, but pressed the attack, her crew fighting in vacuum suits as they loaded the last torpedo salvo. By hour 6, Marcus had 8 ships left. The defenders were down to half strength, but they fought with the desperation of parents protecting their children. Both sides knew there would be no quarter, no negotiation, no survival for the losing fleet. Finally, the Sovereign's Pride and her remaining escorts broke through into low orbit around Zefkari. The planet spread below them, a world of impossible beauty, floating cities connected by bridges of solidified music, forests that sang with the voices of wind and rain. And hidden beneath that beauty, laboratories where plague makers worked to exterminate humanity. Biological research stations identified, the targeting officer reported. 17 facilities, all heavily shielded. Marcus studied the display. The research stations were distributed across the planet, many of them built into the floating cities. Precision strikes would be difficult. Civilian casualties would be massive. Sarah approached him. "Marcus, there are 3 billion Zephyrians on that planet. Most of them have never even seen a human." He met her gaze. "How many humans will die if we let those weapons launch? That's not the point. That's the only point that matters." His voice was steady, final. "All batteries. Target the research facilities. Maximum yield warheads." The order went out. Across the surviving human ships, weapons officers armed their most powerful munitions. Antimatter warheads, quantum torpedoes, planet cracker kinetics designed to punch through any defense. The bombardment began. Streaks of annihilation fell through Zefkari's atmosphere, each one carrying the destructive power of a small star. The first impacts vaporized entire floating cities, their musical bridges falling silent as they crashed into the forest below. Shock waves rippled across continents, setting the singing trees ablaze. Marcus forced himself to watch every impact, every casualty report, every number climbing on the tactical display. 100 million, 200 million, 500 million. The Zephyrian fleet broke off their attack, racing back to defend their homeworld. But it was too late. The biological research stations were already burning, their engineered plagues contained within fusion fire hot enough to sterilize molecules. By the time the bombardment ended, Zefkari was scarred beyond recognition. The floating cities had fallen. The singing forests were ash. Nearly 1 billion beings lay dead, and their planet would take centuries to heal. But the plague weapons were destroyed. All targets eliminated, the weapons officer reported, his voice hollow. Marcus nodded. Signal the fleet. Begin withdrawal. As the surviving human ships limped away from Zefkari, pursued by the shattered remnants of its defenders, Sarah stood beside Marcus at the command station. Neither spoke for a long time, watching the wounded planet shrink behind them. Finally, she broke the silence. We've become something monstrous. Marcus stared at the stars ahead. We've become what we needed to become to survive. The galaxy will never forgive us. The galaxy doesn't need to forgive us. It needs to fear us enough to leave our children alone. 3 months later, word reached them that Earth was celebrating. Parades in New Geneva, victory songs on the entertainment networks. Humanity had stood up to galactic oppression and won. The hegemony was in retreat, their client species abandoning them, their throne worlds burning. But on the ships of Marcus's fleet, there were no celebrations. Only the weight of what they'd done and the knowledge that it was far from over. Because in the depths of space, other powers were watching, learning, preparing. And Marcus Chen, the admiral who had burned thrones and turned worlds to ash, stood at his viewport and wondered if there would be anything left of humanity's soul when the wars finally ended. The transmission came during the fleet's resupply at a hidden asteroid base, a burst of quantum encrypted data from Earth Command. Marcus read it alone in his quarters, and for the first time since Elena's death, his hands shook. Hegemony, client species, requesting terms. 14 worlds seeking separate peace. Earth Council authorizing acceptance of surrender from non-combatant populations. War Crimes Tribunal being established for post-conflict justice. Justice. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Sarah found him an hour later, still staring at the message. Orders from home, she asked. They want us to come back, Marcus said quietly. They want to put us on trial. She was quiet for a long moment. Maybe they should. Marcus looked at her, this woman who had followed him through the burning of worlds, who had watched civilizations die at his command. Do you regret it? Every second of every day, she said without hesitation. But I'd do it again because the alternative was watching our children grow up in chains. Marcus nodded slowly. The tribunal can judge us after we finish this. There are still throne worlds burning, still weapons being built to use against Earth. We stop when the threat stops. And if Earth orders us to stand down? Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at the star charts on his wall. Each red marker represented a world they'd scarred or destroyed, a species they'd humbled or exterminated. The map of their war crimes stretched across 3 sectors of space. Then we keep the promise we made, he said finally. No matter what Earth commands, no matter what tribunals they convene, we burn every throne that threatens our children. Even if we have to become pirates to do it. Sarah studied his face. You know there's no coming back from that path. There was no coming back from Vexathari, Marcus replied. We crossed that line the moment we chose to fight like humans instead of die like heroes. The next morning, Marcus transmitted his response to Earth Command. Fleet will continue operations until all threats to human worlds are eliminated. Earth's children will inherit a galaxy where their species commands respect through strength, not mercy through submission. Admiral Chen, commanding. The reply came within days. Admiral Chen relieved of command, Fleet ordered to return immediately for decommissioning and tribunal proceedings. Failure to comply will result in charges of treason and crimes against sentient beings. Marcus read the message to his assembled captains. When he finished, silence stretched across the briefing room. Finally, Harrison spoke up. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Marcus looked around the room at these men and women who had followed him through hell. Captains who had watched their crews die, who had fired on civilian populations, who had burned worlds in humanity's name. They were war criminals by any reasonable definition. They were also the reason human children would grow up free. "Earth Command is right about one thing," Marcus said quietly. "We are war criminals. We've done things that will haunt the galaxy for generations. We've become monsters in the name of survival." He stood, looking each captain in the eye. "But our children will inherit a galaxy where humanity is feared rather than pitied, where no alien empire will dare demand that Earth kneel, where the words human fleet will make tyrants wake up screaming." Harrison leaned forward. "So we continue? We finish what we started," Marcus confirmed. "There are still thrones to burn." One by one, every captain in the room nodded. They had passed the point of no return long ago. Now there was only the path ahead, leading deeper into darkness, but away from humanity's extinction. The last message from Earth came a week later, broadcast on open channels. Admiral Marcus Chen and the ships under his command are declared pirates and enemies of human civilization. Any nation offering them aid or comfort will face immediate sanctions. Earth Command disavows all actions taken by these vessels. Marcus listened to the announcement while standing in the Sovereign's Pride's observation lounge, watching stars wheel slowly past the viewport. Sarah joined him, saying nothing. "They're protecting themselves," Marcus said finally. "Smart politics. Blame the pirates for the war crimes, claim the moral high ground for the negotiations." "Does it hurt?" Sarah asked. Marcus considered the question. "No," he said, surprising himself. "Elena would understand. She'd probably approve doing what's necessary even when it damns you. So we're pirates now. We're whatever we need to be to finish this." He turned from the viewport, face set with iron resolve. "Signal the fleet. Plot course for the Thekmari Empire. If they want to call us pirates, let's give them something worthy of the name." The war continued for another 18 months. Marcus's pirate fleet became legend throughout the galaxy. The human ships that appeared without warning, demanded the surrender of weapons facilities, and left burning worlds in their wake when refused. The Thekmari Empire fell first, their reptilian population reduced by 70% before their High Council sued for peace. The Kaveth Confederacy followed, their hive minds scattered when Marcus's fleet cracked their queen worlds open like eggs. The Zorthak hegemony, the Veltari principalities, the nexus of screaming stars, one by one the galaxy's predator species learned to fear the sight of human warships. Earth officially condemned each action. Privately, human colonies expanded into territories suddenly empty of hostile species. Human merchants found trade routes suddenly clear of pirates and extortionists. Human explorers discovered that alien empires no longer demanded tribute for passage through their space. The galaxy learned to fear and respect humanity. It was exactly what Marcus had intended. The end came at Morthak Prime, homeworld of the hegemony's founding species. It was here that the tradition of Galactic Empire had begun 10,000 years ago. Here that the first aliens had looked at younger species and decided they existed only to serve their betters. Marcus's fleet had been reduced to 7 ships, all that remained of the Great Rebellion that had once numbered in the thousands. The Defiance, his flagship, bore scars from 100 battles across the spiral arm. Her hull plates were patched with metal from a dozen different worlds, each repair telling the story of another desperate fight against impossible odds. "Admiral," came the voice of his second-in-command, Commander Chen. "We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different hegemony governors. They want to negotiate terms." Marcus stood before the bridge's main view screen, watching the jeweled surface of Morthak Prime grow larger. The planet was beautiful, too beautiful for what it represented. Crystalline cities caught the light of its binary suns, creating rainbows that danced across continents of perfect order. No negotiations, Marcus said quietly. Not anymore. The rebellion had cost too much. Earth was glass. Kepler Station was debris. The Tau Ceti colonies were ash. Every human world that had dared to stand against the hegemony had paid the ultimate price, but in dying they had inspired others. The Zalani had risen, the Corvan republics had joined the fight. Even some of the younger hegemony species had turned against their masters. "Sir, the planetary defense grid is powering down," reported Lieutenant Torres from Tactical. They're not going to fight." Marcus closed his eyes. After all these years, after all the blood, the hegemony was simply giving up. It felt hollow somehow. "Admiral Chen to Admiral Marcus," came a familiar voice over the comm. Marcus turned to see his old friend's weathered face on the secondary screen. Admiral Chen commanded the Zalani contingent, 3 sleek ships that moved like silver dancers among the stars. "I see it too, old friend," Marcus said before Chen could speak. 10,000 years of tyranny, Chen mused, and it ends not with a battle, but with a whimper. The Hegemony Council had ruled the galaxy through fear and technological superiority for so long that they had forgotten how to actually fight. Their younger species had done their fighting for them, and now those same species were in open revolt. "Admiral," Torres called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's from the council chamber itself." Marcus nodded. On screen, the view screen shimmered, revealing a vast chamber of polished stone and precious metals. At its center stood 7 beings, the last members of the Hegemony Council. They were tall, ethereal creatures with elongated limbs and faces that seemed carved from moonlight. Their ancestors had been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, the first to encounter other species, and the first to decide that might made right. The center figure, wearing robes that seemed to shift between dimensions, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of millennia. "I am High Counselor Bethmach, last speaker for the Morthaki hegemony. We surrender." The word hung in the space between worlds. Marcus felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a bone-deep weariness that had accumulated over years of war. "Your surrender is accepted," he said formally. "You will stand down all military forces and submit to judgment by the Allied Worlds Tribunal." "We understand," Bethmach replied. "But know this, young species, we ruled because we had to. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers you cannot imagine. Without order, without hierarchy, chaos will consume everything." "Maybe," Marcus admitted, "but we'll face that chaos as free beings, not as slaves." The connection ended. Hours later, Marcus stood in the council chamber itself, surrounded by beings from a dozen different worlds. The hegemony banners had been pulled down, replaced by the simple silver star of the Allied worlds, a symbol of cooperation rather than domination. Commander Chen approached, holding a datapad. "The final tally, sir. 437 worlds have declared independence. The younger species are requesting membership in the Allied worlds. Even some of the older hegemony races want to join." Marcus nodded, then walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city. Below, crowds had gathered, not just Morthaki, but beings from across the galaxy. They weren't celebrating exactly. There was too much grief for that, too much loss. But there was something else in their faces. Hope. "What now, Admiral?" Chen asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of children, human, Zalani, and Morthaki together, playing in the plaza below. "Now we learn if we're wise enough to deserve the freedom we've won. The hegemony was dead, the galaxy was free, and tomorrow the real work would begin." In the distance, the binary suns of Morthak Prime began to set, painting the crystalline cities in shades of gold and crimson. It was, Marcus thought, a good day for new beginnings. The age of empire was over. The age of cooperation had begun. But that, as they say, is another story.